June 26, 1943, approximately 3:30 p.m. Sky over occupied France near Saint-Omer. The Thunderbolt number, 428487, was falling apart. 21 20mm cannon shells had pierced the fuselage. More than 200 7.92mm machine gun bullets tore through the metal. The engine cowling was ripped off. The windscreen shattered. The cockpit covered in oil and glycol. The pilot, Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron, 56th Fighter Group, couldn't bail out. The canopy was jammed. Couldn't jump. The aircraft was spinning out of control. A German Focke-Wulf FW-190 was chasing him, firing final bursts. Johnson had no way to fight back. No way to escape. No way to get out. And yet, he made it home. This is the story of a man who failed the Air Force gunnery test, flying an aircraft everyone said was too fat to fight. And together, they proved that underestimation can cost you the war. June 1943. The United States 8th Air Force was in the middle of its strategic daylight bombing campaign over occupied Europe. Industrial targets in France and Germany were being hit by formations of B-17S and B-24S, escorted by long-range fighters. Or at least that was the idea. The problem? The P-47 Thunderbolts, newly arrived in the European theater in April 1943, still didn't have external drop tanks. Their range was limited. The bombers were left unprotected deep inside enemy territory, where Luftwaffe fighters waited. Saint-Omer, in northern France, was one of the most active German air bases. Elite units operated there, including JG-2 Richthofen, commanded by experienced aces. It was hostile territory, and it was exactly where Johnson was flying that day. Robert Samuel Johnson was born on February 21, 1920, in Lawton, Oklahoma. Son of a farmer, he grew up during the Depression. He worked in cotton fields, fixed tractors, learned to deal with broken machinery, and improvise solutions. When the war began, Johnson enlisted in the Army Air Forces. He went through flight training but failed the aerial gunnery qualification test. He didn't meet the minimum required score. Even so, he was assigned to fighters. He wasn't a prodigy. He wasn't a natural marksman. He was just an ordinary man who learned to fly. In January 1943, Johnson was sent to England, assigned to the 61st Fighter Squadron of the 56th Fighter Group, commanded by Colonel Hubert "Hub" Zemke. His aircraft, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. And nobody was excited about it. The P-47 Thunderbolt was the heaviest fighter ever put into combat by the Allies. It weighed nearly 6 tons fully loaded, more than twice a Spitfire. It had a 4-meter diameter in the forward fuselage because of the enormous Pratt & Whitney R 2800 double wasp radial engine producing 2,000 horsepower. Pilots called it the Jug, short for Juggernaut, but also a reference to jug, milk jug, because of its rounded shape. Other nicknames: Thunder Mug, 7-ton milk bottle. British pilots, accustomed to the elegant Spitfire, refused the P-47 when it was offered. In the first months of operation, the P-47 had mediocre performance at low and medium altitude. It climbed slowly. It rolled heavily. It looked like a dinosaur compared to the agile German FW-190s and BF-109s. But it had one advantage that nobody yet fully understood. It was indestructible. Robert Johnson flew his first combat mission on April 13, 1943, as part of the 56th Fighter Group's debut over Europe. No victories, just a survival. On April 17th, during a bomber escort mission, Johnson was attacked by German fighters. He managed to escape but didn't shoot down anyone. He was still learning. On June 26, 1943, everything changed. After surviving the attack that should have killed him, Johnson returned to Halesworth, England, with the P-47 destroyed. The aircraft landed. Johnson walked away alive. The ground crew counted the holes, more than 200 hits. The engine kept running. The structure, intact enough to fly. It was definitive proof. The P-47 could take punishment that no other fighter could withstand. Johnson returned to combat. On August 13, 1943, he shot down his first enemy aircraft, an FW-190, Then came more. On August 19th, 2 FW-190s. On August 27th, another one. He was learning to use the P-47's weight to his advantage. High-speed dives, attacks from above, kinetic energy transformed into tactical advantage. On November 26, 1943, Johnson shot down 3 aircraft in a single mission. By January 1944, he was already one of the top aces of the 56th Fighter Group. On March 8, 1944, Johnson led his flight in one of the largest air battles of the war up to that point. Hundreds of German fighters attacked formations of B-17 bombers over Germany. Johnson and his group faced waves of Bf-109s and FW-190s, shooting down several, but losing 34 bombers that day. On March 15, 1944, Johnson led again. This time, he used the radio to coordinate reinforcements, vectoring other groups of P-47s to intercept the Germans before they reached the bombers. No bombers were lost. Johnson shot down 2 enemy fighters. For this action, he received the Distinguished Service Cross. On October 8, 1943, Johnson shot down Major Hans Philipp, one of the most decorated aces of the Luftwaffe, with 206 confirmed victories. Philipp was killed in the engagement. When Johnson completed his operational tour in May 1944, he had 27 confirmed aerial victories, surpassing Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record, 26 victories. He was the highest-scoring living American ace in Europe at that time. June 26, 1943. Johnson was flying as wingman to Captain Walter Cook on an escort mission over France. The formation was attacked by German fighters. Johnson became separated from the group during the evasive maneuver. That's when the FW-190 appeared. The German pilot, identified in some accounts as Oberleutnant Egon Meyer, an ace from JG-2 with dozens of victories, attacked from behind. The first burst hit the engine. The second, the cockpit. Johnson tried to maneuver, but the P-47 was slow, heavy, vulnerable. The FW-190 kept firing, shell after shell. Johnson couldn't fight back, his guns jammed. Couldn't escape, the engine was failing. Couldn't bail out, the canopy was stuck. He was trapped inside a metal coffin, being torn apart in the air. And then, the FW-190 stopped firing. It pulled up alongside Johnson. The German pilot looked at him. Some accounts say he gave a salute. Others say he just shook his head. Then he turned and flew away. Maybe he was out of ammunition. Maybe he thought Johnson was dead. Maybe he recognized there was no more need. Johnson was alone, wounded, lost, and he still had to fly 200 kilometers back home. Johnson didn't know if the engine would hold. Oil was leaking, temperature rising. The windscreen was covered in fluid. He could barely see. The cockpit smelled of fuel and burnt metal. He descended to low altitude, trying to avoid more German fighters. He crossed the French coast over the English Channel. The engine coughed but kept turning. The P-47 vibrated but kept flying. There was no radio, no precise navigation. Johnson used the sun and compass, estimating direction. Every minute felt like an hour. Every vibration felt like the end. He crossed the channel, spotted the English coast, recognized the Halesworth area, prepared to land. The landing gear came down, the flaps responded. The engine still worked. Johnson landed the P-47 on the runway, rolled to a stop, shut down the engine, climbed out of the cockpit. The ground crew ran to him. They looked at the aircraft, counted the holes. Couldn't believe he was alive. Neither could Johnson. The attack began at 3:30 p.m. at approximately 7,000 meters altitude over Saint-Omer. Johnson was flying as wingman to Cook when the formation was intercepted by German fighters. In the confusion, Johnson became separated. The FW-190 came from behind at high speed. The first burst hit the P-47's engine. 20-millimeter shells exploded in the cowling, tearing off metal panels. The engine began leaking oil and glycol. Johnson tried to turn, but the FW-190 was faster. The second burst hit the cockpit. The windscreen exploded. Shards of glass and metal flew inside. Johnson ducked his head, protecting his face with his arm. The FW-190 kept firing, shell after shell. The P-47 shook with each impact. Johnson tried to activate his guns. Nothing. Tried to call on the radio. Silence. Tried to open the canopy to bail out. Jammed. He was trapped. The FW-190 made another pass. More bursts, more impacts. Johnson felt the aircraft lose lift. He pushed the stick forward, diving to gain speed. The P-47 responded, heavy but obedient. The FW-190 followed him, fired again. This time, Johnson felt something hit the armored seat behind him. The impact was violent, but the armor held. And then, the FW-190 stopped. Johnson looked to the side. The German fighter was there, flying in parallel formation. The pilot looked at him. Johnson looked back. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the FW-190 turned and flew away. Johnson was alone. The engine still worked. Barely, but it worked. He turned west toward the English Channel. Descended to 1,500 meters, trying to avoid more contact. Crossed the French coast. Flew over the sea. The engine coughed. Temperature rose. Johnson adjusted the mixture, trying to keep the engine alive. Every minute was a gamble. He crossed the channel, spotted England, recognized Halesworth, prepared to land. The landing gear came down. The flaps worked. Johnson aligned with the runway. Cut the engine, landed. The P-47 rolled to a stop. Johnson shut everything down, opened the canopy. Now it worked. Climbed out. He was alive.